I want to take a minute to talk frankly with my liberal friends about COVID-19 and how strange it is that they seem as worried about it as ever. I'm going to focus on Los Angeles, but most of what I say will apply to any blue stronghold. The pandemic has been a partisan thing almost since the beginning. Once the initial 2 weeks to slow the spread came and went, the coronavirus became a political football, just like everything else does these days. I predicted on this channel way back in May of 2020 that the lockdowns would last until after the election. My Democrat friends took offense at that. They thought I was impugning their motives. I wasn't. I was impugning the motives of their politicians and their propagandists. And I was well aware of how polarized we'd become. I knew that individualist Republicans would resist government interventions. That was a given. I knew that their resistance would make collectivist Democrats lean in to those same interventions. That would spark more resistance on the right, which in turn would inspire the left to get passionate about COVID precautions. That's how polarization works. 2020 was an election year. Of course, the Democratic Party and left-biased news outlets would exploit the divide. Fear is always the easiest tool to lay a political hand on. That's common knowledge. But at this point, almost a full year after the election, COVID restrictions continue, especially in places where vaccination levels are the highest and deaths are the lowest. Why? Let me walk you through some stats. I'll use only liberal sources, okay? The New York Times published some data a few months back. The article, by staff writer David Leonhardt, says that Republicans have underestimated the danger of COVID-19 and that Democrats have overestimated the danger. The survey asked what percentage of COVID cases required hospitalization. This chart shows the results. Pause the video here and take a look. Bill Maher recently shared these stats with Jimmy Kimmel.
I have to cite a survey that was in the New York Times, which is a liberal paper, so they weren't looking for this answer. But they were talking about, the question was, what do you think the chances are that you would have to go to the hospital if you got COVID? Mm-hmm. And Democrats thought that was way higher than Republicans. 41% of Democrats, and the answer is between 1 and 5%.
Okay.
41% of Democrats thought it was over 50%. Another 28% thought it was 20 to 49%. So 70% of Democrats thought it was way, way, way higher than it really was. Liberal media has to take a little responsibility for that, for scaring the shit out of people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's much harder for every touring act to sell tickets in blue states.
Oh, interesting.
They're afraid to go out of the house.
The Times article goes on to say that Democrats overestimate another key figure. Quote, Democrats are also more likely to exaggerate COVID's toll on young people and to believe that children account for a meaningful share of deaths. In reality, Americans under 18 account for only 0.04% of COVID deaths. Close quote. Yeah, 0.04%. And the number is even smaller among the very young. Still, schools closed for a year and in some places are still closed. How will we even measure the loss of learning and socialization? Lately, Southern California liberals seem to be doubling down on COVID precautions, like marathon runners getting their second wind. Do the numbers warrant this? COVID maps are updated daily by the New York Times. Take a look at the vaccination figures for LA County. Now, look at the COVID hotspots map. The dark areas are the hotspots. We've got 14 cases per 100,000. That's all? This is what 100,000 people looks like. I could fit 14 people in here. And we're talking cases, not hospitalizations. For a look at that number, let's use my own neighborhood. The border of Pasadena is about 1,000 yards from my door. There are no hospitals here in Altadena, so I'm included on this map. 9 COVID hospitalizations per 100,000. So what percentage of us are in the hospital with COVID? Let's do the math. Divide the small number, 9, by the big number, 100,000. Now multiply that result by 100. That gives us our percentage, 0.009%. So I have 9 thousandths of a 1% chance of being hospitalized with COVID. I gotta say, I like those odds. And I'm fully vaccinated. As President Biden and the New York Times have been telling us, the unvaccinated are 10 times more likely to be hospitalized with COVID. So those 9 people? Probably not vaccinated. I went to a tavern in the San Fernando Valley last Thursday to see a friend's band play. There was a gal out front having a smoke when we got there. We asked about masking. She said, "Mask up when you walk in, but once you've ordered a drink, you're good." Not one single person in that whole saloon was wearing a mask, not even the bartender. You've been to a bar, haven't you? That's the place where people lower their inhibitions with alcohol and shout into each other's ears over the sound of the band. Not to mention making out in the parking lot. A pandemic nightmare, right? Well, here's the dirty little secret, my liberal friends. The bars have been open for 3 months. If your fear of the Delta variant was accurate, we'd be having a hell of a surge. But we're not. These are our numbers from last week. This is from Los Angeles County's COVID dashboard. Trend lines are down for every metric. Let's take a closer look at the rate of positive tests. The numbers have been falling since the 1st of August, and that dramatic mountain of a spike, how high did it get? The percentage of tests that came back positive peaked at just over 6%. That means 93% of those who thought they should get tested didn't even have COVID. That was at the peak on August 1st. The ratio is now more like 2% positive to 98% negative. Let's take another look at that vaccination map. Remember Dr. Fauci's magic number, 70%? We should be calling this the herd immunity map and celebrating with a citywide block party. And remember, the vaxxed are not the only carriers of antibodies. In LA County, nearly 1.5 million people that we know of caught COVID and recovered. This means that they have immunity, whether vaxxed or not. Don't forget to add them to the herd. Let's go back to my neighborhood again. Here's the vaccination numbers in this area. We are way past herd immunity levels. Why are some liberal churches in Pasadena still afraid to open their doors? Why does every store require masking? Why are my liberal neighbors fully masked when exercising alone in the open air? Do they think that COVID travels in invisible clouds of gas? None of this makes any more sense than the overweight 65-year-old Trump loyalist who flatly refuses to take the safe and effective vaccine brought to him by his political hero. Polarization doesn't make anybody more rational, does it? Just to wrap up, COVID-19 is said to have killed 672,000 Americans. That's a hell of a lot of people. But in the U.S. today, we have over 331 million people. COVID has killed 0.2% of us, at an average age of about 75. For perspective, our average life expectancy is 78. Most COVID decedents had one or more serious health issues, and almost none of those people were vaccinated, like I am, like you are. I've lost 4 friends during the pandemic. One of them was a very close friend, but none of them died of COVID. In an average year, we Americans lose about 3 million of our fellow citizens. Perhaps the ongoing focus on COVID-19 is a way to compartmentalize our general fear of death. Perhaps a mask and a 6-foot distance and a Zoom church service and a DoorDash meal makes us feel that we've got the upper hand. But since we know that all of us will one day die, shouldn't we spend our time living? Shouldn't we throw off our isolation and milk as much joy from life as we possibly can? I think that we should. At some point, my friends, we are going to have to let normal become the new normal. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.